Starting a new unit on triangle congruency, and day 1 is corresponding parts of congruent figures. Now remember, congruent means the same, and corresponding means that they go together or appear to be in the same position. So when two figures are congruent, the figures have corresponding sides and angles that are congruent. For example, triangle ABC is congruent to triangle DEF, or they are the same. So let's list out the congruent parts or write the congruency statements. We're going to start with this corresponding sides. Side AB is congruent to side DE. Side BC is congruent to side EF. And lastly, side CA is congruent to side FD. Now the angles. Angle A and angle D are corresponding parts of congruent figures. They are congruent. So are angles B and angle E, as well as angle C and angle F. All right, let's work on some examples together.
All right, so each of these pairs of figures is congruent. Complete the congruent statements. So in our first example, triangle FGH is congruent to triangle LMN. So if we have side FG right here, this is going to be congruent to the corresponding side of ML. GH, this side here, is going to be congruent to its corresponding side of MN. And lastly, side NL down here would be congruent to the corresponding side on this triangle, which is FH. All right, now let's look at the angles. Angle F, which is this angle here, is going to be congruent to angle L. Now, if your picture isn't as nice and clear and defined as this one is, and it is tricky for you, you can always look up here to the way that they have named the triangles. So angle F is the first letter they list. So if you look at the other triangle, the first letter they list is angle L. So that means that those two would be our congruent or corresponding parts of congruent figures. So if we go to angle M is going to be congruent to angle G. And as you can see, it's the middle letter here and the middle letter here. So you don't have to have those pictures to know what parts correspond together. The way that they are written or the order that they are written in is important and it matters. So angle H is going to be congruent to angle N. Alright, let's jump down here to the next example. So figure STUV is congruent to figure WXYZ. So that means that side ST, let's look up here at the way it's labeled. ST are the first two letters. It's going to correspond with the first two letters of our other figure. So WX. So you can see that this side here would be congruent to side WX, which is this side here. So if you don't have the picture, you can use the label of the figure. So side TU is going to be congruent to side XY. Side YZ, which is right here, is going to be congruent to side UV. And lastly, side ZW is going to be congruent to side VS. Alright, let's go to our angles. Angle S is going to be congruent to angle W. Angle T is going to be congruent to angle X. Angle Y is congruent to angle U. And lastly, angle Z is congruent to angle V.